This is Jordan.
This is Cy.
And this is the Facepalm Report.
Your source for all the news, politics, and pop culture that is truly facepalm worthy.
Hello everyone, this week we're joined by our good friend Cy, who will be helping us with our facepalm worthy legislation edition.
Hello, Podcast World.
Podcast World, Cy, Podcast World.
Sup.
So, we've been sort of nickel and diming you guys with these little idiot legislation. I just want to do one thing. We're going to get it all done and out of the way. And hopefully no one's going to come up with something else that is more idiotic and something that we need to discuss. Hopefully we will be done with most of the crazy legislation bits and can move on to more fun things. But before
come on, Jordan. That's a challenge to this current Congress.
I know. And they'll rise to the occasion, I'm sure. But eternally hopeful they won't. But before we get into that, there's a correction we wanted to make. Again, mea culpa.
Yes, and I'm really glad that I was able to come on and help out with this show because as a lifelong LGBT activist, this is near and dear to my heart. Last episode, Jordan, you were talking about Paul Clement, the lawyer that has been retained by Congress to fight the Defense of Marriage Act.
To fight for?
Sorry, that's to fight for the Defense of Marriage Act on behalf of congressional Republicans.
Yes.
You quoted him, and I don't have the quote in front of me, but I'm going to paraphrase badly and say that the point was because GLBT folk have made such dramatic strides in political clout over the past few decades, they shouldn't get married. And I wanted to challenge you on that and give a quick 3 or 4 minute primer on how the Equal Protection Clause works. You with me so far?
Yeah.
14th Amendment, the happy result of the civil rights movement, says no state shall deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws. The way that gets interpreted by the courts is that anytime someone comes up and says, hey, I'm being discriminated against, they have to pick between one of 3 what they call levels of scrutiny. There's a rational scrutiny, intermediate scrutiny, and strict scrutiny. And the general premise is, the rational basis means that the state only has to prove that they have a reason to make this law. It doesn't have to be in any way related to discrimination. It just has to be, there's a reason for this law. Intermediate is that they have to have a reason that's grounded in some kind of good rationale. There has to be justification. And then strict scrutiny is the state has to prove that what they're doing is necessary and that the discrimination is an unfortunate side effect that could not be avoided. Again, still with me?
Yep.
All right. I'm going to get off my soapbox really soon. So the Paul Clement quote was actually a really important part of his defense. I'm not saying I agree with him, but he's doing what any lawyer with his salt would do, because what he's arguing is that because gay and lesbian folk have political clout, they should not be considered what's called a suspect class. Suspect classes are things like people like race and sex and things that are considered, and religion. Normally things that are immutable, with the exception of religion, but things that the courts have decided are groups that have been discriminated against so often that you have to keep an eye out. And so Paul Clement's quote was basically saying, these guys don't count as having been sufficiently discriminated against to count strict scrutiny, because that makes his job harder if strict scrutiny is applied.
Yeah, and there was a better quote, and I couldn't...
So that's...
Yeah, there was a better quote, because there was something else where he said, it's also they can't have a child by accident, so they don't need the protection of marriage, which is supposed to help you with that. But yeah, it's
the actual argument that he's trying to use that makes no sense whatsoever.
No, they're floundering. But so yeah, thank you for sufficiently cowing me. Thank you.
Close my book there. All right, what do we have on the docket for today?
Yeah. Well, so we're going to start with one. And this isn't a recent bit of legislation, but I'm sure people have heard, or maybe not, that the USPS shall be dropping Sunday delivery. And this has made some news.
Saturday delivery.
Yeah, sorry, Saturday delivery. We've never done Sunday delivery. because, well, anywho. So, now, this is all based on a past piece of legislation, which is why I wanted to bring it up to show that each of these laws have an effect. You do these things, and then maybe down the road, you might come into this brick wall. See, what happened in 2006, our federal Congress passed the Postal Accountability and Enhancement Act, which...
That's thing, right? I mean, like, that sounds like something that would fly pretty well.
Oh, yeah, I mean, well, they always name these things like, the Protect Puppies Act, or... nobody names their bill like, this is the bill to, ruin everyone's day. But, so what this required was that the Postal Service would pre-fund its retirement plan for 75 years. Now, that seems like, okay, well, they're a federal agency, they should have this thing, taxpayer dollars, the whole 9 yards. But here's the problem. No business, whether public or private, has that sort of requirement. And they are actually they have to now pre-fund the retirement for employees they haven't even hired yet.
And no private business could function that way.
And the post office gets the short end of the stick on this because they are this weird hybrid between a public and a private business with the sort of worst things of both. So it's like they're supposed to maintain a profit margin, but they can't do competitive pricing, and they can't there's a lot of restrictions on them, and anytime they try to change those restrictions, they have congressional oversight, and we all know that right now Congress can't do anything to save its life because...
Sure. I really want to hang on to this for a second, though.
Okay.
They have to fully fund their retirement plans for 75 years.
Yes.
That means that they have to have a retirement fund in place for someone they will hire who is not yet born yet and who will still retire within that span.
Yes.
And this is an entity that is funded by our 49, however much a stamp costs now. It's like basically 50 cents, our 50-cent envelopes that people still send bills in for, those who still send bills in the mail.
Well,
and the federal government, which can't even pass a budget year to year.
Mm-hmm. Well, and there's the thing. It's like, and a lot of people have said, well, nobody sends mail anymore. And that, there is part of that. Like, the post office does have that technology problem. But the thing is, there are still a lot of businesses that send mail through the United States Postal Service. They could be fine. They could be running at a much better thing if they weren't funding their retirement that far down the road. Like, if you want to have them pre-fund their retirement for... I don't know. I'm not an accountant, but let's just throw out a number even 30 years. They have to, that we have to make sure they have enough money that if the zombie apocalypse happened and they needed and the economy shut down, that they could somehow fund the retirees for their Spam and shotgun shells to fight off the zombies.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but it's just this is crazy facepalm-worthy legislation.
Yep. Moreover, and this is going a little far afield, I realize this goes into the, we can't be like any other evil commie countries category. But we used to have the United States Postal Savings System. It was a basic level bank that ran out of the post office for people who couldn't get regular bank accounts, for people who, for whatever reason, couldn't go through the normal banking system, because post offices are everywhere. You could have an ATM, you could deposit your paycheck. People would actually use their post offices instead of payday lenders. The post office would make money, and everything would work again.
Quit dreaming, commie.
I know. America.
Well, comrade, shall we continue?
Please.
All right, so let's move on to some interesting bits of legislation. Now, I'm a dyed-in-the-wool, bleeding-heart liberal guy. I mean, I don't think that's a surprise to anyone. But like there are times where my fellow liberals and Democrats and anyone sort of on that side of the political spectrum do things that make me go ugh. But for some reason, when I was digging up legislation this time, I came across a lot of conservatives offering up some stuff that just seemed totally wacky. So we're gonna.
All right, hit.
So this is I'm gonna put this under the heading of do Republicans just hate poor kids? Because there are a couple bills, one out of North Dakota and one out of Vermont, where the Republicans and conservatives of those state houses and senates have been opposing funding school lunch programs, or various parts of them. Now, there's North Dakota State Representative Mike Schatz?
I think it's Schatz, yeah.
Schatz is opposing funding the school milk during breakfast, or they have this like little after breakfast period, basically saying we don't have the money, and they're saying we prefer, because they tried school breakfasts, but then there's a sort of mid-morning break period where kids get milk and juice, and some pay and a lot of them can't, so the schools provides it. Well, the idea is, we're doing this breakfast, but because of school closures and consolidating schools, some kids are traveling as much as 100 miles and can't get to school in time for the breakfast. They're making it just in time for class.
First period, yeah.
First period. So, and then in Vermont, even you aren't untouched by some of this. There's another.
Well, at least Vermont was a move in the right direction, right? I mean, in Vermont, the case was that the House Education Committee tried to pass a bill that would extend school lunches.
Yes.
That would continue. Hey, these are kids who can't afford food. Let's at least get them through their school day.
Yes.
Problem being,
you have the Vermont House Minority Leader Don Turner said that he and his colleagues oppose this plan, not because it's not because they don't like, the kids who can't afford lunches and all that, but that they feel that they want to see the whole education agenda all in one go, which isn't how you do legislation. There are some big bills that sort of have those multi, it's like subsection A of D and like the whole 9 yards, and it's a big bill. But most of the time, you pass this bill will fund X, this bill will fund Y, this bill will fund Z, and this is one of those things where it's like it could be they might have a legitimate concern, but most of the time I just smell, I'm going to say this so it doesn't sound like I hate people.
It does kind of smack of, I'm really trying to cover my bum on this one.
Yeah. But these ones, while bad, are not the pinnacle of WTF-ery.
It can always get worse.
It can always be worse. Mr. Stacey Campfield of Tennessee has proposed a bill. Yes, Campfield. That name should be familiar to some of us, has proposed a bill that would tie the welfare payments to parents. It would tie it to their child's performance in school. Basically, if your kid starts to not do well in school, you lose up to 20% of the benefits.
Now, this is a classic case of confusing correlation and causation.
Yes.
There is a direct correlation between income levels and performance in schools. And there are many scientifically backed reasons for that. Things like, hey, when parents are out working overtime night shifts trying to make enough money to pay for a roof over their heads and enough food to survive day to day for them and their kids, they don't have, free time to sit around the house and teach little Timmy ABCs. The problem is that cutting the money that they get won't increase the amount of time that mommy and daddy have to sit around and teach little Timmy his ABCs.
Well, and here's what is even better, because you mentioned science. There is some very good science on how hunger affects learning, especially.
Absolutely.
Yeah, especially like early childhood development. Your brain, as it's forming, you need to feed it. And here's what gets me. So let's just say you have this family, and little Timmy isn't doing so well in school. It could be, home reasons. It could be he's having struggles. It could be he's in a school that isn't the best, or it could be that he is, like me, I used to be very bad at school. And then sometime during my development, we found out I was next to blind. Like, I have horrible eyesight. I wasn't seeing what was on the board.
Yep.
Like, so let's just say, it could be something like that. Anything, for whatever reason, but we don't investigate the reason, we don't try and fix it. We just say, okay, we're cutting off 20% of the welfare benefits to this family because little Timmy's not doing well at school. So little Timmy is now hungry. He's going to school hungry. He's further not able to concentrate. And actually, we are reducing the overall potential of his brain by not properly feeding him as he's growing up, so it becomes harder for little Timmy to do well in school.
It's hard enough for me to get through my workday around lunchtime. I can't even imagine what little Timmy's dealing with.
Exactly. So why would you do it this way? And it reminds me, again, this is sort of like the Mr. Campfield says it's, for trying to make it so that the parents will further encourage their children to learn. But as you said, they might be, working 2 8-hour shifts back to back, coming home, maybe being able to put some sort of food in front of their kids, and then crashing for these maybe 5-6 hours of sleep. They need to go back and do another 2 8-hour shifts.
Mm-hmm.
But this reminds me of back in 2010, there was a South Carolina governor, Andre Bauer, I think. I might be butchering his name.
No relation to Jack.
Yeah, well, maybe just as conscientious of people. I don't know. Anyway.
Oh, dear.
Who said, who basically compared anyone who's economically disadvantaged to a stray animal. He said, and this is a quote.
Wait.
My grandmother was not a highly educated woman, but she told me as a small child to quit feeding stray animals. You know why? Because they breed.
Say what now?
It gets better. You are facilitating the problem if you give an animal or a person ample food supply. They will reproduce, especially ones that don't think too much further than that. And so what you got to do is you've got to curtail that type of behavior. They don't know any better. Yeah. So
where do I even start with that?
You don't, because you can't, that's one of those that you can't tackle that thought.
Okay, but the one thing I will say, and I think what's, almost the worst part of it, aside from the obvious low-hanging fruit, is that if you really want to stop the problem, you pick them up out of the problem.
They're poor because they're lazy, Si. Didn't you hear? That's how it works.
But this whole education thing tends to, breaking that cycle of... Yeah. Okay, well, since we're talking about education...
Oh, yeah. So education's the way to get out of poverty, but that's unless, you have people keep passing bills that screw with that.
Right. Can I actually, I want to, if we can, run through a quick bullet point of the next few and then come back and hit the major topics of each?
Sure.
Because there's one overarching trend that I'm noticing.
All right. Go for it.
All right. So bullet points here. Senator Campfield, once again, trying to bring back the Don't Say Gay bill.
Oh, he wants you to call it the Don't Teach Gay bill, by the way. He doesn't like the Don't Say Gay bill.
Do I care what he thinks? Preventing school teachers from discussing homosexuality at any point through grades K through 8. Also, tacking onto that any kid who comes out to a teacher, principal, school nurse, school counselor, requiring that staff member inform the parents. Point 2, since we're talking about sexuality, Montana is trying to make sex ed opt-in instead of opt-out, and preventing any organization that has anything to do with abortions from assisting in any way in sex ed. So that's your Planned Parenthood, that's any other kind of community organization, basically. While we're in Montana and Colorado are talking about trying to insert creationism, or intelligent design, as they like to call it, in schools. And trying to mask it under the phrase critical thinking. And last but not least, right here, Idaho is coming out trying to propose a bill requiring that students read Ayn Rand's Atlas Shrugged and pass test to graduate.
Now, clarification on that last one, and this is something we can sort of tie into some of the other education stuff, okay? Because
Sure.
So, Senator Gowd, again, someone who I think I might be butchering his last name, sorry, basically has said that this wasn't a real bill. He wasn't proposing this as actual legislation. It was a shot across the bow of the Idaho Board of Education to sort of, because they were changing high school graduation requirements. Here, I don't like the legislation where someone goes, "JK, it was just a joke." Liberal, conservative, if you do, like, there was, I think somewhere in South Carolina last go around, there was this lady who was, because of all the reproductive health bills, was proposing this thing that, like,
Ohio, I think it was, that had the vasectomy law, right?
Vasectomy, yeah, like, it was like, men can't have vasectomies because it interferes with, sperm and the production of children, and it was a joke. It was to show how ridiculous. But the problem with this, just kidding legislation is you have people who will back that. You have people who will take this parody and confuse it with the actual intent. So even if this is a joke bill, it's a stupid thing to even propose.
All right, so I'll put the Ayn Rand thing on the back burner, but the don't say gay,
oh yes,
the sex ed, the creationism, there's an overarching theme here that I want to point to. The argument that I hear in each case, every time this sort of thing comes up on a legislative level, is parents concerned about what their children are learning in school, right? Like, that's the talking point that comes up.
Yeah, like, I don't want my kid, hearing about any science that might confuse the church Sunday school, and I don't want my kid hearing about sex.
So here's my thought. How insecure are these parents? Like, how much do you not trust your own ability to teach your children if that's your concern?
Well, I tend to be a bit harsher with my criticism.
Because the are like, but, if my kid came home and said, "Hey, I learned about this thing in school that I really disagreed with," I'd say, "Well, that's funny because this is how the world really works, Timmy."
Well,
it's that hard. You have to actually just talk to your kid.
Here's my thing. I'm like I said, I'm harsher in my criticism. Mine is the idea that a parent, like, by the somewhat dubious distinction of having spawned a child, does not grant you, like, I've heard people say, kids don't come with instruction manuals. Like, just because you've had a child does not make you an expert.
Right.
And when it comes to, like, the sex ed one is what really gets me, because people say, well, I don't want my kids learning about sex because then they'll go have sex, which I think you're denying reality there, for one.
PSA has functioning body parts and hormones. They're gonna have sex unless you as a parent are working to instill values, concerns, etc., that help head that off of the past. Responsibility. And
well, here's the thing, like, and most of the, like, when people freak out because they hear about they're going to have sex ed for kindergartners, do you know what that kindergartner sex ed is? That is when they say there are people who might want to touch you inappropriately, and these are the people you tell if someone says that. The don't get into the van with candy thing, and that your body is your own.
Like, boys have certain parts and girls have certain parts, and this is why we don't play with them in public.
Well, and here's the thing. Now, I am not saying that every parent who would want to opt their child out of sex ed is molesting their child. But let me tell you this. I'm positive any parent molesting their child wouldn't want an outside influence saying, this is not good for someone to touch you like that without your permission, and it's not really at all good for an adult to touch a child like that. So if you...
That's a loaded comment.
Yeah, I know. That's what gets me. It's this idea that you're not going to let... You want to take kids out of this education that will tell them when something is wrong.
Right.
When something is not okay that an adult may be doing to them, and you might put that choice in that adult's hands. That makes me just wig out.
Yeah, I mean, again, I perhaps give people slightly more benefit of the doubt than you do on this. But again, when I hear parents talking about these sort of issues, what I hear them saying is, I'm not enough. I don't talk to my child. I don't communicate with my child. And I'm not convinced in my ability as a parent to raise my child well. And that's just... And how depressing is that?
That's... Well, and, maybe it's that weird sort of, that... Because you can't trust the government to do it, because they're obviously going to turn your kid into a Marxist.
Or they're going to turn your child gay, as our good friend Campfield thinks that he's protecting the good folks of Tennessee from.
Oh, yeah, and that one, that like, anyone in your school, if you even say, like, I'm not quite sure if I'm gay or not, they have to go tell your parents. That's dangerous. Like, especially in a state like Tennessee. Oh, my God. Like, there are parents who will abandon, kick out, straight up kill their kids if they find out their kid is gay because, well...
Yeah, absolutely.
They have crazy...
I live in Chicago, right?
Yeah.
Chicago has the single highest homeless youth LGBT population in the country because of rules like that. Because young kids, as young as 14, 12, 10, will say to their parents, I think I might be gay. And they'll get turned out of their homes, and they have to go somewhere. So they go to a major metropolitan area, and in the entire upper Midwest, I mean, where else are you going to go?
Mm-hmm. Well, and it's like, because there's a uncomfortably large youth homeless population. But my last statistic I heard was like the whole LGBT community makes up about 10% of the population, or is it 10 or 15?
They actually just released news data. It's more like 3.5.
Oh, 3.5. So, like, a fairly small fraction of the population. LGBT youth nationally make up 40% of the homeless youth population.
Exactly.
Yeah. They're disproportionately kicked out by parents who have been told by their particular news station of choice or from behind a pulpit that, their gay child will molest their other children because all gay people are evil pedophiles. And they'll hear this stuff, and then when they find out their kid's gay, they go, oh, God.
Absolutely. And as a lifelong devout Christian, I want to caveat that I'm trying not to paint too broad a brush here, but there is an insane amount of harmful, vitriolic crap that gets spewed on the justification of verses in the Bible that don't actually have anything to do with homosexuality.
Well, and it's also from most of parts of the Bible, it's surrounded by stuff that everyone else also ignores, like
right.
That whole two cloths of different weaves.
Right. If we're going to talk sin, then let's talk about why you're eating shrimp.
Hey, I will not be part of any religion which does not allow me to eat bacon-wrapped shrimp.
I tell you, I've been vegetarian for well over 20 years now, and that is one of the things I miss the most.
Yeah, so we people ignore all that. The funniest one I've ever seen was somebody who had the a man shall not lie with a man as he lies with a woman tattooed on their arm, sort of missing the irony, I guess, of the whole.
Because Leviticus also says, "Thou shalt not make marks upon your body."
Yeah, so it's like this. But like enshrining that in legislation, that what got me the most was the fact that they put school counselor in that language.
Yes.
That was just like, oh my god, you can't do that. That's not okay.
They really can't, according to the American School Counselor Association's Code of Ethics.
Yeah. But do you think Mr. Campfield has read those? I mean, this is a man who is somewhat confused about how HIV is spread because he's convinced that he's doing all this to protect children from a dangerous lifestyle because, according to his unscientific worldview, you pretty much can't get AIDS or HIV/AIDS from straight sex, even though that's...
Yeah, I'm really glad you brought that up because, it ties into what we were saying earlier, but too, because the homeless youth LGBT population is at a dramatically increased risk for HIV and AIDS because they don't have access to contraception, because they're living on the street and engaging in riskier behavior, be it sexual or drug involved.
Yep. So, and we can't, and like with the sex ed thing, we can't teach safe sex, especially not...
Because that's encouraging people to have sex instead of saying, hey, you know what? This is how you keep from dedicating your life to a cocktail of drugs to keep you alive that costs roughly $3,000 a month.
Yeah. Well, and it's like that idea of... Because when they talk about this, don't say gay, because they're afraid you're going to teach gay sex. And as I've said before, there is no such thing as gay sex. Because straight people do everything...
I challenge you on that.
Well, okay. Anything that a same-sex couple does...
do with each other that a man and a woman can't do on their own.
Yeah.
But...
Yeah, it's... I was inarticulate there, but it's like, yeah, it's everything that you can do with a man and a woman can be accomplished through some sort of combination of straight people. Like, it's this idea that you can't teach safe sex, all sex, without encouraging, flaming homosexuality everywhere is...
Well, and it's a part of a larger social problem in which we shame sex and we don't talk about it.
Well, because you can't talk about it, because if you talk about it, kids will have sex.
It amazes me that all these people who actually say that and mean it were once themselves teenagers. And, like, apparently that memory has slipped past them or something.
Well, there are some people who, like, there are small portions, especially amongst the extremely religiously devout community. But I think even amongst, like, hardcore fire and brimstone evangelicals, the people who maintain abstinence before marriage is only 30%. Like, and they're the sort of... Actually, I think it's slightly higher amongst Hindus and Muslims. Like... They might bump up to 35% of, like, people who really do maintain the no sex until marriage thing. But, again, talking about this, we're just trying to confuse this situation with science, which is, of course, evil.
Right.
Because, you got the people who are saying we can't teach evolution because...
Right, because it's a question of scientific controversy, I think they like to say.
It's okay. So when the Montana bill was discussed, I watched the committee hearing on the particular bill out of Montana.
Because you're a nerd like that.
Yes, because I'm a wonk. I'll admit that openly.
I can't complain. I was watching the Illinois State Senate just the other day.
So, and what I found really heartening about this was that the bill had like 26, 27 opponents and no proponents. The only person who spoke out in favor of the bill was the bill sponsor who wrote it.
All right.
Yeah, I know. And I don't know if that's because, people who might have normally supported it were scared away by the way it was written and what she said, critical thinking, which, is scary. But it was, the way these...
You know that in Texas they've actually pushed to remove critical thinking as an educational goal.
Yep. Because it makes people challenge previously held conceptions, which we know is the most awful thing in the long history of awful things.
Our educational system, but hey.
Well, and so these creationism bills are set up with the idea, like, these were really well crafted to avoid saying intelligent design, but they say, yeah, that controversy of evolution. Just laying the facts out here real quick, folks.
I'm pretty sure that evolution is the most scientifically solid theory, I think even in front of gravity.
Yeah, well, see, there's the thing. Evolution is not a scientific controversy. It may be a political and religious controversy, but the science behind it, and part of it comes from the way we use the word theory. I'm not a scientist, but I've tried to work the word theory out of my layman terms because of that confusion. People, because there's that whole thing. Well, because most people day-to-day conversations, if I say I got a theory that these senators are whacked out in the poo brain.
People switch around the words theory and hypothesis.
Yeah. Like if I say I have a theory that these guys are crazy, that means I've got a hunch when I say it as a non-science person. In the science world, theory, like people say, well, if it was a theory, it'd be called the law. No, that is not true. That's that misunderstanding. Because a theory is pretty much, you get a theory after you've tested a hypothesis and, peer review, and it's been confirmed by observable evidence. You have all this stuff, and people say, well, why isn't it called the law? Law, a scientific law, is something that can be expressed in a mathematical statement. That's why you have Newton's laws of motion, because
right. But they say proof. They say proof as in a mathematical proof, not as in blue is blue.
Yeah. It's like law in sciences. It can be expressed in a simple equation. Biology is a little complicated.
A little bit.
A little bit. So it's very hard to break it down into something as simple as F equals ma, Newton's second law of motion. Just boom. It's
right.
Concise. You can say it like that and you're done.
The thing that really just boggles my mind, I still don't understand. I flat out don't get it about all of this stuff about creationism in schools. Is that, again, raised lifelong Christian. Both my parents study theology for a living. One of them's a priest. I've never understood why creationism, like the whole concept of God creating the universe in 7 days or whatever I want to call it, is inherently opposed to the concept of evolution. It says God created the creatures. It doesn't say how.
But he only did it in 7 days. Come on, Cy.
Oh, but no. But for starters, there are in Genesis, the first two things in the Bible are two completely different creation stories. Mm-hmm. So for starters, it's contradicting itself there. Secondly, yes, the Bible says 7 days. It also says later on, 1 day in your presence is, like 10,000 elsewhere. So it's clear that God's working on a different time relativity.
Yeah. No. So
what's 7 days to God could be several millennia for us. And hey, it all works out.
But see, that's people who can.
My best explanation is that these are people who are disappointed that they can't justify humans riding dinosaurs.
Hey, that would be awesome. I would have loved to, Flintstoned it out on a T-Rex, but
Go to Kentucky. They got a theme park for you.
Oh, I really didn't want to do that. Though actually, the T-Rex they have looks more like Jurassic Park, and unfortunately now we sort of understand that they were more brightly colored and feathered. So maybe they're. But of course, that's science again, and I'm an evil person for bringing it up. But here's the thing. There's a great thing with this idea that they put in these bills, critical thinking, because they want to foster critical thinking by asking people to challenge this idea. And sure, you want to ask the questions. I'm all for that. I'm someone to ask these questions. But the idea is when you ask a question with critical thinking in mind, when someone gives you an answer that's backed up by evidence, the peer review that is shown, there are observable elements, you're supposed to say, "Oh, you've answered my question. Why, thank you." You're not supposed to go, stick your fingers in your ear and go, la, 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 la.
Right. There's no actual academic literature challenging evolution.
But, it's, what I really like is there's this really great quote from the Dalai Lama. Mm-hmm. And he says, if science proves some belief of Buddhism wrong, then Buddhism will have to change. Like, and actually, and this idea that, science and religion can remain happily coexistent if you don't try to sit there and spend time crossing them by saying that, that teaching evolution will completely destroy everyone's faith, and therefore I have to protect my child and keep them.
It's all about protecting the children.
Yes. Won't somebody just think of the children? Somebody has to, because one, when you have that idea that you're going to protect children from science, you put them at a disadvantage in the rest of the world. Because here's how,
because the rest of the world works on science?
Yeah, well, it's like this idea that, one, how do you teach creationism? Because if you're just going to say creationism...
In Sunday school.
Well, if you're going to teach creationism, because pretty much teaching creationism doesn't essentially... It's like, God created everything. This will be on the test.
It actually is on some tests.
Unfortunately it is. But it's the idea that, because how quote-unquote intelligent design is taught is essentially saying science doesn't work. You can't, it's the tide goes in, the tide goes out. You can't explain that, man. Essentially robbing...
Neil deGrasse Tyson would disagree.
Well, because he's a smart guy. But it's that idea that if you take apart the scientific process, you put everyone at a disadvantage who has to, because if, let's say you grow up and you've gone to this school that teaches creationism, and then you want to get into a university, and they're going to go, what classes did this guy take? Creationism 101. We're going to put that application to the side.
Especially if you're trying to major in pre-med or something where you have to actually understand biology.
Yeah. So,
and then those kids are going to get spanked by the application committee.
Speaking of spanking...
Nice segue there, huh?
Might be one of the worst segues ever. So, we'll leave just...
I do my job to lower the bar wherever I can.
We'll leave education behind, but just in the future, please stop screwing with education like this, people. Please. I want to grow up in I want to be in Star Trek universe. I want to have spaceships. So stop screwing with my science, please.
We have the doors already. That's something.
Anywho, so spanking, yeah.
And not in the fun, happy way.
Yeah, not in the fun, happy. So a lovely bill out of Montana.
You guys are having a fun time, aren't you?
Oh. No, we're not. Representative Jerry O'Neill, a Republican, has proposed a bill that would allow convicted criminals to have corporal punishment as part of their sentencing considerations. So essentially, let's say I've been convicted of whatever. I can say to the judge, I prefer lashes instead of my nickel in prison. Okay, so I tried to track down a bill request to figure out why this bill was proposed, but I'm gonna guess it was probably had something to do with we kind of have a overcrowded prison and jail problem.
Yes, we do, and there are two things I will say, granting some modicum of justification for this Jerry O'Neill guy. One is that we have a terrible, out of control prison system that's way overpopulated for stuff that our prison population has increased 700% over the last 50 years,
and it's mostly non-violent things.
Right,
you can get sent, at least in Montana, you can get sent to prison for bad checks.
Yeah. Now, thing two that I will say also is that at least this thing is opt-in.
Yeah, it's not
The problem with that, though, is that the people who are going to opt in are people who are living on or near the poverty line, who can't afford the time in jail.
Yep.
This is turned the debtor's prison into the debtor's whipping post.
Yep.
Because, clearly, Richie Rich isn't going to sit down and get lashed.
Mm-hmm.
Because he can afford to sit out a year or two. If you're a single parent with a couple of kids and a job working part-time at Walmart, you can't really take that time away.
Yep. So instead of figuring out something like lowering the mandatory minimums or start to decriminalize possession or, reduce sentences or get rid of prison sentences for certain things that aren't really, like, entirely ruining the fabric of society, such as murder. That
Little things like that.
Little thing, that's if you haven't, stabbed someone, I think maybe you might not need to spend 5 years in jail. Instead of doing something like that, it's whipping. Mm-hmm. And I mean, this is coming from a guy who last November, I mean, the Republicans really try to bury this guy's bills, the sort of publication of anything and any talk of them, because I mean, this is a guy who last time round wanted to be paid his salary in gold and silver, because you got to prepare for the the apocalypse, I guess.
Well, it was November of 2012 back then. You got to prepare for the end times and the rapture and all that.
How is gold supposed to protect you from the rapture?
Well, I always wonder about that too. It seems like it would be help if you were expecting not to go, which seems a little bit cynical and self-serving.
Anyway, so yeah, and it's unfortunately these crazy pants legislation things don't stop. I mean, because we have right now, especially since we have to prepare for the apocalypse with all our guns, but now the government's trying to take our guns,
which they're not actually, but
whatever. But we've got like at least 15 states, including Montana and Wyoming and a bunch of others, have said they've tried to pass laws that say you can't enforce federal gun laws.
I just want to step in right here. This is a complete and utter waste of everybody's time.
But they're coming for your guns.
And it doesn't matter. There's this wonderful little bit in the Constitution that says that federal law trumps state law. So even they pass these laws that say, like, states aren't allowed to assist federal laws about gun control in any way. So theoretically, what they're saying is, if someone's trafficking assault weapons through your town, the sheriff's office can't provide any assistance to the ATF. But, again, federal law trumps state law, so anything they say about this doesn't mean jack diddly.
Because, I mean, we've dealt with this issue of state and federal law. It was called the Civil War.
Yes, we did that once, didn't we?
But another one's coming, Si. Another one is coming, and that's why you need your gun. And you'll start the Civil War because of the... Wait a minute.
What's hard there?
But...
And again, most of the gun legislation that's being proposed on the federal level are things that are supported by majorities, not only of the population, but majorities of gun owners and majorities of NRA members.
Yeah, like the universal background check, which is supposed to be like this Stalinist conspiracy that will launch us into a fascist state with Obama, Hitler. I'm not following these ideas. Like, I can't make my brain do this. It's like, okay, a background check where it says, okay, you have a history of violence. You've been convicted 3 times of spousal abuse.
Mm-hmm.
Let's not have you have a gun, because the likelihood is you're going to shoot your partner with that gun. So let's not let you have a gun.
Yeah.
You have been, it's like, and people bring up these things. Well, what if I want to sell a gun to my nephew?
Okay. Run a background check.
Run a background check. Like, this doesn't seem that mind-boggling to me, but, again, I'm just the crazy liberal guy over here.
Yeah. Well, and moreover, I mean, I get people wanting guns. Like, I mean, you and I have both lived in downstate Vermont long enough. People hunt. People live on hunting. I totally get that. And, some people think that self-defense is an issue for a gun, and I disagree, but whatever, we can agree to disagree on that one. The thing that gets me are the people, especially with handguns, people with guns in the home like to say, like, I need to defend myself. But for every person with a gun in their home, for every person that defends themselves with a gun in the home, is one person as opposed to the 5 or 10 people who are accidentally shot, who commit suicide, who intentionally shoot someone else in their own home.
Yeah, like there's this idea that a woman, if she has an abusive spouse, should have a gun so that she can shoot him.
Is more likely to get actually shot with that gun.
Yeah, it's the raging person who's doing all the beating. Who's more likely to go for the gun first?
Yeah.
That person who's a violent individual, or the victim. But yeah, it's
again. Really... I say this again, living in Chicago, where we have basically an epidemic of gun violence.
Yeah,
I think we're up to 500 people now this year.
But you need your state legislature to protect you from the feds coming in and enforcing reasonable gun control.
Yeah. I just pulled it up. This is the study I was thinking of. 2 years ago, a guy named David Hemingway from the Harvard School of Public Health did some studies and found that every time, for the women thing you were mentioning, for women who need protection from an abusive partner, if a gun was present in the house, lethal assaults were 2.7 times more likely to occur, and there was no protective effect found for having a gun in the house. So adding a gun to the picture increases the odds that she will get fatally killed 3 times.
Mm-hmm. Well, another... an unfortunate segue I will make. Another thing, that a lot of women and a smaller percentage of men die of breast cancer.
Yes.
So, it's
check yourself anyway.
Yeah. Get yourself checked. So, there's this thing going on with reproductive health legislation. People who want to restrict abortions are doing some very weird things. Where they're trying to make it that your doctor, if you are trying to get an abortion, they want it to make it where your doctor will lie to you. Where your doctor will say there is a direct causal link between women who get abortions and women who get breast cancer. This is a lie. This is a lie. This is not true.
I don't even know what?
Both Kansas and New Hampshire, at least, there may be others, has bills in the works that would basically mandate it as, where if you go to your doctor and you're trying to get an abortion, they have to say, oh, BTW, this will increase your chance of breast cancer. Now, again, this is that sort of whole assault on science thing.
Yeah.
It's, since we can't get the facts on our side, we'll make them up. But, let's just say you're a fairly smart woman who goes to your doctor about an abortion, and then your doctor tells you something that, because you're a smart woman and have read all this stuff up, because, maybe you yourself are looking to being a doctor, or you're just a sort of science
Or maybe you read up on what happens before you go in for a procedure.
And your doctor says, oh, by the way, an abortion will increase your chances of breast cancer. And then you go, no, it won't. That's erodes that trust between a patient and their doctor. And
yes.
What I find funny about these suggestions, these laws around abortion, is when we were when the whole Affordable Care Act, the Obamacare, was getting passed, there was this thing where people would say, well, we don't want to put a bureaucrat between a patient and their doctor. unless, of course, that patient is making a decision we do not agree with, and then we want to have transvaginal ultrasounds, which they don't have to see, but will have to be described to them, and then we will tell them that there's a breast cancer link when there isn't.
Yeah.
Like...
And yet, the simple and cost-effective way to solve this, actually just giving people contraception.
And sexual education.
Yeah.
Which we can't do because it'll make people have sex, which they're already doing. But like you said, like the access to contraception, like...
Well, you heard about the St. Louis study, right?
I heard about New York City, where they like increased contraceptive access and their unplanned pregnancy rate dropped like 27%.
There's a 2-year study, 2008 to 2010 in St. Louis, and the control groups, et cetera. They gave a whole bunch of women free birth control, thousands of people, so it's a great sample size in a large urban environment. The abortion rate in that 2-year span dropped 20% among that group. 20% for cheap pills and condoms.
But again, that's science, which we can't teach. Because it requires critical thinking, which makes you challenge preconceived conceptions and notions. That's why we have to legislate out education.
Clearly.
So yeah, there's a lot of... So, yeah, there's just a lot of crazy stuff out there right now, guys. People trying to pass crazy...
My head hurts from all the face palming.
Yeah, no, it's bad. So, here's... If you live in a state with one of these people trying to pass one of these bills, write to them, call their office, email them, send them some facts. They may ignore them. That's a possibility.
But I would encourage you to do so because it's actually remarkable how much difference it does make, especially if you can take the time, write a physical letter and mail that thing. Not only are you supporting the U.S. Postal Service, but it's the single most effective way of affecting change in your legislator.
Yeah.
Make it happen.
Make it right. Let's make it where they're passing laws that actually help us. Let's move this. Like I said, I want to live in the stars, people. So can we make them stop attacking education? Can we make them stop telling doctors to lie to their patients? Can we feed children in school so they can be smart?
Probably not, but that's what we're here for.
So yeah. So hopefully, I think we've gotten most of them. I think we've dealt with the big offenders, the truly facepalm-worthy things. So maybe in upcoming episodes we can deal with some more fun stuff. Maybe we've put this political monster to bed, at least for a little bit.
For now.
So I thank you for coming on and helping me
Absolutely.
out.
Thank you for having me on the show. Also, for those of you who want to follow up on my mini rant at the beginning of the show about the Defense of Marriage Act trial, some shameless plug for equalityontrial.com. That's a project of the Courage Campaign out of California, and they do a fantastic job collating and explaining everything that's going on the legal front of issues of marriage equality.
Yes, follow them. They are
cool people.
Awesome. Yeah. So, and we'll, like the show, tweet the show, follow the show,
all that social media stuff the kids do these days.
Yes. And if you want me to stop going on about politics, if you're bored with this, please send me something. Send me something that isn't these guys being stupid. Because I think I've had my
Politicians provide plenty of material. You have to provide some kind of material
something
to talk about.
These guys, because they keep coming up with more. So, fare thee well, podcast land. We'll see you later. Please like our Facebook page, The Facepalm Report, or follow us on Twitter, at Facepalm Report, and send us any stories you find to be truly facepalm worthy.